So you've had yourself an idea. Maybe you've seen someone making a little bit of money as a side hustle, or perhaps you've got yourself a passion that you want to turn into a profit. And with that, you've thought, I'm going to set myself up a business. Well, this was me 6 years ago when I decided to set up my video business. In fact, it all started about 12 years ago when I started learning to play the drums and I wanted to actually make some drumming videos for YouTube. I then had to understand video and filming and editing, and that was where my interest of that all came about. And a few years later, we're now managing to monetize all of those passions at the same time. And so in this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to consider before you go ahead and set up your business, or in fact, if you have just started. And these are all the same things that I wish I knew earlier and even still sometimes struggle to consider as I set up new businesses and ventures. So with that, let's get into the video. So if we're meeting for the first time, my name's David Winter and I run a video agency here in the northeast of England in the UK. The actual video agency itself does okay. We do about 10 to 15k a month at the moment, but truthfully, I'm actually a little bit scared or dubious of scaling this up too far. I've spoken in previous videos about the challenges of the business model of a service-based business and certainly a video agency. And I'm going to talk about a few of those in this video as well. But all of these challenges that we're facing, along with many businesses, by the way, business is incredibly difficult. All of these challenges and considerations are things that are pushing me forward into new business ventures to help secure us as a business and enter ourselves into some more interesting and better standing business models. Firstly, in terms of other businesses, we have my drum channel. And this is actually just more or less a personal branding move. And it's basically just me playing drums when you actually break it down in terms of the content and marketing. But the longer term play for this is that I would love to one day own and run a drum shop. Now that is an incredibly difficult business, and retail itself is one of the most difficult and probably most horrific industries and spaces to be in. But I do believe that in that space and in that environment, it would be very good fun nonetheless. But I do really believe that we'd be able to take a drum shop, or one that we either purchase or start from scratch, to a fairly decent level in terms of building a brand within that space. I'm dubious of calling this one a business, but the way that this brand or channel generates revenue at the moment is of course YouTube revenue from actually playing gigs myself, which is a swapping time for money situation. Recording drums in the studio, also a swapping time for services, but then also brand deals and partner stuff, which comes in on the odd occasion. Not that they're hugely paid at the moment, but I want the longer term play of trying to actually build relationships in that space. Moving on from that to the opposite side of this silly little multiverse, we have Affinity Racing, which is a channel that I set up during COVID after losing all of my clients for the video business and not knowing what the hell I was going to do. I decided to set up a few laps of Gran Turismo just to try and chill out. And a few hours later, being the horrid little workaholic that I am, I'd set up and decided I was going to launch Affinity Racing, which was basically a way to hold myself accountable and force myself to do something that I enjoy. It was a channel that I really wanted to set up for quite some time and basically had no time because I was too busy with the video business. It's doing all right. We got ourselves a couple thousand subscribers at the point of recording this, but hopefully as you look now, whenever you're watching, maybe we've got ourselves a few more. In terms of our revenue model for this, we obviously want to monetize our YouTube channel, which we are already doing, but later down the line, we want this to be a big events-based business. So we're talking car shows and motorsport, even though Auto Alex is someone who's probably already beaten me to that and doing an incredible job. Ironically, Auto Alex was actually the reason, himself and Car Throttle, that I wanted to set up this channel and had the idea about 10 years ago, and then 5 years later, actually went and had and done it. Shout out Auto Alex. One of our first and not so obvious steps to get ourselves set up on the right track for this brand is to actually own an MOT and service station. We want to be operating in the auto space, and I do really believe that with the market and know-how, we'd really be able to grow a business in this space and take it to the next level. I've talked about in other videos the difference I believe that we could make in this. It's a space that's not really been, innovated or disrupted all that much. It's still got a really bad reputation, and I do think that we could do really well. In terms of other businesses and revenue models, we'll discuss these as we go through the video, but for now, let's break down the things you need to consider before you set yourself up your own business. Now, bear in mind that some of the most important questions aren't always the things that you have to ask first. The first questions are absolutely the fundamentals, but then to set yourself up for real success, some of the more important questions are coming a little bit later in the video. So make sure you watch the whole thing and drop your your thoughts throughout. So it goes without saying, but obviously one of the first things you want to think about is what you actually want to do. It's no good sitting there thinking, I just want to make some money. That's not how the world works. You need a service, you need a product, you need something of value that people want to buy and exchange their money for. The handful of simple first questions you want to ask is, what is something that you enjoy? And most importantly, what problem do you actually want to solve in the world? If you can combine them and you can have yourself a really good passion and purpose, then you're off on a winner. The next thing to consider is actually the demand for your product or service. Now, this is fairly obvious, but let's be real, everybody has a business idea at least once in their life, and most of the time, they're not really needed. So the first thing to consider is your product actually wanted, or is your service actually wanted? For example, for us as a video agency, we work with the NHS here in the UK and a lot of local councils. Video for them is absolutely needed, not only to get their message across to help communicate with the people that they are working with and the patients that they serve, but also in terms of a compliance standpoint, they absolutely need video for accessibility and for information. Not to go too much into this, but to give you an example, we previously worked with a lot of small businesses and actually small local bands and musicians as well. Budgets for them was always a little bit tricky, and so video actually became a luxury rather than an absolute necessity. For us, instead of trying to race to the bottom and compete on price, we decided that our product was actually best placed with the NHS and local councils and some of the bigger commercial businesses as well. That is a prime example of having a valuable product but actually knowing where to place it, which takes us on to our second point, which is actually knowing your customer base. Knowing your audience is absolutely crucial with your business, not only for your actual product and service, but your marketing also. Make sure you do plenty of research into who this is actually targeted to, who's actually likely to buy it, and maybe do a little bit of research, not with friends and family, but in the wider marketplace. So take a look at something like Kickstarter, where people can actually pay you money in advance, even just a simple email pre-order where people can sign up and get notified when your product launches. That's a great indicator as to how well your product will actually do at launch against your marketplace. Number 3 is thinking about how are you actually going to market this as well. We're going to touch on marketing properly, but this is the sort of rule of 3 when it comes to working out your product and demand. You've got your product, you've got your audience, and then you need to know how to market your product to that audience. Take a look at competition in the marketplace. What are they doing well? What's working for them? And also what is not? How can you disrupt that space as best you can? You want to think about your message. What is it that you're actually saying? And that will indicate to you the media that you need to use as well. So many people have a message, they will sign up to every social media platform and post the same message across all of those. But without getting too into it, LinkedIn, for example, has a totally different tone of voice as to how you would communicate on Instagram. All of these things have subtle differences, but they really do make a big difference when you're trying to tie together that product and audience. Pricing and rates is the next thing to consider. You've got your product, you've got your audience, and you want to do a little bit of research into how much, first of all, you can charge, what a realistic price would be for your service, either per hour, per day, or your product itself. You do want to start thinking about very early on your gross profit margins, your actual net profit at the end of the year, which will be about 10% if you're lucky of your total revenue. So you make £100,000, you're probably going to be lucky to hold on to 10,000 at the end of the year. This was a big mistake that I made when I very first started because I just didn't think about gross profits, net profits, cost of sales, just general subscriptions for video editing software and overheads. None of that I ever considered. Big mistake. Write down all of the things that are going to actually cost you as a business, all of the money that you would like to make, in an ideal setting at the end of the year, and have that be reflected in your sales price. Remember as well, as a freelancer, let's say you work 40 hours a week. Realistically, you're actually only going to be able to bill for 2, maybe 3 of those days on average. This was certainly what I found. You're not going to bill and work 40 hours a week and be able to charge out those 40 hours a week. You also need to give yourself some time for your admin, for your invoicing, for everything else that comes with running a business. And that is something that not many people will consider. I don't want to scare people off, but the next note that I've written alongside this is actually building a team, because this is really important and something that I wish I knew and started doing a lot earlier. Only in the past 18 months to 2 years have I started building a team here in the video agency and this wider Affinity Media group, but that is something that basically took far too long. It took me about 4 years to realize that this was actually needed. So as much as we're looking at prices, as much as we're looking at how much money you want to make, as much as we're looking at net profits and gross profits, you do need to start thinking very early on about who you're going to get involved. If you're thinking about building a big business, no big business was built with just one person. It may have been founded by one person, but it was never built by just one person. One of the most important things you can think about is your business model. Is your business model actually going to work? In the past, we've previously seen two key business models. One is selling products and one is selling a service, which is basically swapping time or hours for money. More recently, we started to see a subscription service where people pay every month for something like Amazon, for Netflix, or for project management software like we use within the business. All of these businesses have their pros and cons, and you want to start looking into each of these and understanding which is going to work best for you. Selling products, I can tell you straight away that if you are buying something or creating something and then selling it, you are going to really struggle with your margins in the early days. That's just a fact of product-based business life, and it's one of the first things that I found out when I tried to launch my own, and it's a reason that I've been dubious to step back into that space for quite some time. The truth is, you will always want to sell your products for as low as possible to get those initial sales, and as you start to increase the price, it will feel like that extra money is going nowhere, because as you grow, your gross profit will always be eaten up by your operating costs as you scale. It's a really difficult business, but obviously majority of the businesses in the world are product-based businesses. So we're of course not saying it's impossible, but those early days can be a bit of a challenge. A lot of businesses now swap time for money. So we see freelancers, we see service-based businesses, and one like ourselves as a video agency. The advantage of this is that it's a very easy business to get into, in the sense that everybody has time that they can sell if they're willing to marry that up with a particular skill. Apart from maybe cameras and laptops, all the obvious sorts of things for a video agency, you're not really having to do too much investment in the early days. And that was a really, really good pathway into business for myself. Another business is actually a rental or hire business. And this is very similar to swapping time for money, except you're swapping a product for time for money. Where, let's say, for example, you might have a inflatable hire business, so kids' bouncy castles and things like that for children's parties. In the early days, I actually looked at setting this up because it seems very lucrative. It seems like you buy a bouncy castle for a few £100, you rent it out a few times, it's paid for itself, it's profit thereon after. The truth is, in those kinds of businesses, you can be on a race to the bottom. People will typically look for the cheapest price, and it can actually take a lot more time to be in the green. For example, you might buy a couple of bouncy castles, they're paid off. Ultimately, you're going to want to buy some more. You're going to want to have bigger inventory, bigger choice, bigger stock that people can select from. And so again, your gross profit is actually eaten up by your operating costs as you scale. Subscription models these days seem to be the golden era of business, where you look at Amazon, you look at Netflix, you look at all these types of businesses that just have constant return in revenue every single month. And actually, Costco is one of the best examples of this business. They actually make very little, if any profit at all, on what you actually purchase on the shelves. Majority, if not all, of their revenue and profit comes from the actual subscription that you pay every month or every year. As easy as this business model seems, especially for something like a software product, you have to remember that there is so much legwork that goes into the early days of this business. Actually getting it off the ground, and even just a minimal viable product, is incredibly difficult, let alone the many years of iterations and updates that you have to do on that software. And that's pretty much, in terms of business models, what we can be looking at. Revenue models, however, is something slightly different, and we're going to look at that as well. But think about these business models as your fundamentals. Every single one of them will have their pros, every single one of them will have their cons. It's what space. The other thing to think about with your business. The other thing to think about alongside your business model is actually your revenue model. They're very similar, but they're not quite the same, or at least I identify them differently. And this might be the most important part of this video, except for one question a little bit later on. So as a business model, you might be selling a product, or let's take our video agency, for example. We are selling a service and we are swapping that essentially for the time involved. So you might have yourself a business model, i.e. selling a product or selling a service, but then you might actually have a totally different way in which you work that revenue. So let's take a barber, for example. Nowadays, you do not have to have yourself a barbershop and charge 10, 15, 20 pounds for a haircut, and that be that. We are seeing now an absolute shift, especially in the modern day and content world, where you could actually go offer those haircuts for free, and on the back of that, charge a subscription model, or just purely run on the kindness of donations and sponsorships. Now, I actually thought of this example last night, and then I thought in my head, actually, there is someone I know that literally does this. And Vic Blends on YouTube, over 2 million subscribers, fantastic channel and fantastic videos and stories that he gets out with the people that he's working with. Now, on the back of those haircuts that he's doing for free and creating content, you literally have sponsorships, not only that, but revenue models from YouTube itself, i.e. the ads that are placed on those videos. This totally flips upside down the typical swapping time for money that we would expect in this industry. The business model is pretty much the same, but the way in which we're working that revenue is slightly different. And that for us is actually, as a video agency ourselves and running these other little small businesses that we're trying to build, is exactly the same thing that we are thinking about. We no longer want to be tied down to their sell a product, sell a service, swap time for money. We actually want to prioritize the content and the brand and work that backwards down into real world businesses. Sponsorships nowadays is actually one of the biggest and best revenue streams for YouTubers and content creators. So if you have yourself a product or service-based business idea, it might be worth thinking about this sponsorship and revenue model. It might not work for everybody, but it's absolutely worth a thought. The next thing to consider is the lifeline of any business, and it is your marketing. You're going to want to prioritize your marketing, but not to get that omnipresent logo that everybody recognizes and a brand that everybody loves. You want to think about just getting customers. That is the absolute main target of a business that is just starting. Now, I did this by offering a load of videos for free and just asking for a referral if they were happy with the video. Now, this absolutely worked, but what I actually just wish I'd done was had the guts to just pick up the phone and ring more businesses direct. Ask them, do you want a video? How much would you be willing to pay? Or what budget do you have? Or this is the options that I can offer you. Would you like any of them? And if they say no, it's not the end of the world. Now, we're going to do loads of videos on this channel around marketing and around getting customers and building your brand. The truth is, I'm not going to go into it in this video because that is not your priority if you are just starting a business. Learn to pick up the phone, learn to essentially cold call, offer something of value, or even just put your product out there for free initially. Learn how to market, learn how to get customers through the door, and your business will thank you for it in years to come. One of the last things to think about is actually the bigger picture, thinking bigger and learning to think bigger. And this is something I've only learned in the past 2 or 3 years. No longer am I just basically charging absolute minimum wage or less than minimum wage when I very first started out and thinking if I just work loads of hours in a week, I'll make kind of enough money to get by. That was absolutely the wrong mindset to begin with, certainly the wrong business sense, of which I had none when I started. But it's around thinking about the longer term vision of your business. What do you want your business to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time down the line? James Sinclair is one of my absolute heroes at the moment, learned so much from this guy, and this is where this is all came from. One of his philosophies is thinking about what your business looks like when it is finished. And everybody says, my business will never be finished. I also have that mindset. But what he means is building a business to sell, even if you have no intention of selling it. That is an absolute game changer of a moment for me. It's forced me to build a better business. We're probably not going to sell a small video agency. It's not really got much value as a business and as a business model, but you never know, some of the others might do. The notion of thinking bigger though, I cannot hammer this idea home enough. When I very first started, I literally was charging £10 per hour or less to produce videos for clients. I didn't really value my skills in a certain sense, but I just didn't think about the wider business. I didn't think about operating costs. I didn't think about costs of sales, subscriptions, or even just actual equipment and cameras and things like that as you progress later down the line. Thinking bigger allows you to do more with your business, have better products, better services, and even work with better clients or have a bigger and better audience. I also thought that it was just going to be me forever and always, one little freelancer running around doing as many videos as possible. A few years later, we've now built ourselves the small foundations of a team, but certainly a team that I want to grow and progress as much as possible. Small-minded thinking would never have got me to the point that I am now, and even though it feels like now I'm still only right at the beginning, it shows just how far back I was 5 years ago. Not only that, but thinking bigger allows you to set up barriers to your business. We spoke earlier about a bouncy castle company, one of the lowest barrier to entry businesses, and it's why so many people set that up and give it a go. A few hundred quid for a bouncy castle that you know you can hire out for 50 quid, 100 quid, 200 quid a day, well, count me in and count everybody else in as well. What you want to set up is barriers around your business that stop people being able to compete with you. Moving it back to our business, as an example, we're now working with the NHS. We're set up as an official supplier for the NHS and the local trusts and hospitals around our area. That also includes councils as well, and we're now on those supplier lists. That's pretty difficult to get onto, or pretty difficult to make those connections and get set up. And so I know that all of these other freelancers that are starting around me going to take a while before they can actually compete. The average net profit for an SME in the UK is only £13,000. And that doesn't sound too bad until you bear in mind that most business owners are taking their salaries out of that profit. Most business owners are paying themselves less than minimum wage, and that is a really difficult space to be in, and they're only taking out what they can afford from the business, or what the business can afford. Difficult space and difficult spot to be in, and that's why thinking bigger just allows you to build those barriers and cushions and have that safety net around your business. Last of all is the most important question that you want to ask yourself. You've decided you're going to set up a business, or you want to at least start looking into it. And if you've got to the end of this video, this is the question that for some people you need to start with. It's the question that I wish I asked myself, and it's a question that, to be honest with you, even today, I still wish I knew all of the answers to. And if you can answer this question, then you're absolutely set up to run the perfect business for you. The question is this: what do you want? What do you actually want out of your business? And you've got to write all of this stuff down. You want to think about, first of all, how much money do you actually want to make? Be realistic, but also be pretty generous, because realistically, it's going to be pretty difficult to get there anyways. Look at the lifestyle that you want. How many hours a week do you want to be working? What does the ideal weekend or the week off look like for you? Think about holidays, the places that you might want to visit, the family life that you might want to have, and what does an ideal work-life balance look like as well? You want to try and think backwards from that, and that might help you with all of the things that we've talked about in this video. Business models, revenue models, your actual marketing, your product, what space do you want to get into? What do you now know with that in mind that you need to avoid? Certainly wish I knew all of this back in the day. And with that comes the end of the video. I hope it's been really helpful. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but if you've sat through it, hopefully it's been worth it. We've been recording for well over an hour. It's taken a lot of time to think about all of the mistakes pretty much that I've made throughout the past 6, 7, almost 10 years actually, of business. And with that, I've put plenty of other videos up on this channel about the mistakes that I did make in my early years of business. That is definitely worth a watch, along with the basics of marketing, content, and all things business ventures for myself on the channel. We're going to be documenting a lot of the days out that we have as a business owner, and also documenting the next 50 years as I venture into the wonderful world of business and all these different ideas that I've discussed in this video. So with that, please do drop your thoughts in the comments. What has this video helped you with, and what other considerations are you thinking now that you want to set up your own business? Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.